All right. New Pragmatic Nation, Chris Courtney here. So good to have you back. It's another edition of the Feedback Loop. Um, yeah, it's been an excellent week of work. I've seen a lot of people jumping in. We've got this morning we got the first submissions from Kara in the interface design program. Tejel's back with a number of questions as she continues to move through the build of her portfolio. And I'm just really excited to jump in. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen and just get this one underway. No monologuing today. We're going to start with Tejel, because I'm actually reached out to Kara. When you're working on Figma files, if you could share them with me in addition to and when I say share, literally share the file with me, rather than just sending a link, because I like to get into the file with you, and I can't do that if I just have the link. I need to actually have the share control. So, overall, just a friendly reminder. We will definitely make sure that I give you as much feedback as I can, regardless of how much access I have. But on Tejel, she's coding the portfolio. She's on her About page, and she's creating an About page, looking for help with the following. And it says here that she's how to left align the button with the text alone. I have to get in there and see what that's about. How to add more space to between the download resume and the caret there. So on the button. So we'll take a look at this. Let's go ahead and just hop over in here in the VS Code. And oddly enough, we're still on Tejel's project from yesterday, so we'll check the status. Go ahead and pull. Let's see what she's got. Okay, so she's actually done a lot on that file. So I'm not quite sure what's going on there, but let's take a look. Good. Go. Oh, sorry. I must have had a server already running. This is going to take me to idea board because we had the idea board page open in VS Code. Let's go ahead and go over to her About page. Now, looks like that, this is another one of those situations where we got a URL hack it to get. Well, let's just go to the home page and see what we got. Let's go to About. Okay, so you've got it, projects About. So we need to, again, we fixed these up here yesterday. So we need to kind of do the same thing. So here it says, okay, so you've got your button here, and basically you're just getting into this. And here's one thing I want to emphasize, in that I'm really interested in the story here. So I want to spend some time here. I also, this comes back to how we talk about what you've learned over time. This should be more about the lessons learned, because when you talk to hiring managers, so much of the time, what they're really interested in, if I can take a second, go over here to Bergen, what they're really interested in is the stuff that we often put at the very bottom. Okay, we often put this at the very bottom of our case studies, and if that's the thing, if that's the nugget, and this is something that I've come to realize over time, if the key takeaway, if the thing you're really looking for is what I've learned as I've gone through these projects, then that in fact is what should be that's what should be your story. Your story is, hey, I'm awesome, and here is what I have learned by doing all these things. And then you can link off to the things. So that's my 2 cents on what should actually be in here. Your skills. I am curious, anytime I see images, these feel almost like icons, like design, it's like a quill, and code, and it's like brackets, and animate, and maybe it's like a moving thing, and then manage, it's a clipboard. I don't know. So I always struggle with those tools. I think you've done a good job of showing, hey, I work with all these tools. Achievements. This is cool stuff. I'm big on keeping the achievements here. I do wonder if there is, it's almost like we're kind of we're pulling out the material. I wonder if we're really designing it yet, or are we just kind of, it feels like you've kind of got these sections, and that's good. I think it's very hard to do anything, to design anything without knowing what your sections are ahead of time. But I'm wondering if there's like some oomph here that we're missing. But let's focus on this, because your questions are through here. So I design, animate, and code. I bring clarity and to complex problems with a people first approach. Okay, so that's cool. I almost want to see these clouds like just move across. But I digress. Let's focus here on this. I just kind of want to inspect it right now to see what we have. I do think that there's, okay, so you got to call right, and then there's to call right content, and then there's this bold. Okay, I would encourage you to think about like getting this content closer together. There's like just a gulf between them right now. And maybe going up more. Again, the typography is it doesn't have a lot of personality to it. I don't know if it's bold. I don't know if you need like another. I almost think you need a style to pair with that's going to draw it and have more personality. But let's get down here to this button. All right, so right now the way this is structured, okay, button about, and okay, so I think part of the problem is it really doesn't feel like there's any space here. This image, this icon, like you might be able to do margin left 10 pixels. I mean, that moves it immediately. As far as the button itself goes, I'm not sure why some of these, it really appears like you're fighting it at the moment. Like you're just kind of fighting the placement of it. So I'm seeing a lot of forced margin here that's been added. And I don't necessarily know, if I just do text align left, nope, that's not going to do it. Float left. Yeah, float left. So this is, not everything has to be CSS Grid or Flexbox. You could actually do all this in Flexbox, to be honest. And right now, if I said display flex, and then let's go back over to our Flexbox, our handy dandy, so flex direction. If I said flex direction column, or row, let's say flex direction, flex dash direction row column. Yeah, so there's column, and then let's see what else can we weave in here. So if we said start, yeah, it's like there's something, like it should just automatically go to the side. I'm not sure. We've got flex direction on there, and I don't want wrap. We don't want flow, and let's talk about this flex. I could do flex shrink for flex grow. Just want to see what else is on that shape. It's just a really interesting. Where is the about page? Oh, it's in projects. Why is it in projects? Well, we'll keep it there for now. It's not a project though. It's an about page. So let's go through here. BT and about. Is there anything on here that? Interesting. Maybe you're going to do some sort of animation with this. As I see like a bunch of H2s. That's interesting. I am curious what the plan is. Although, is that noted out? It might be. Yeah, I'm interested in knowing what's happening here. There's definitely some sort of there's something going on there. Oh, and then I just wiped out my flex. Although it looks like you have flex suddenly. What's happening here? Okay, so this is grid. But that's okay, so that's for the whole thing, and that's fine. You can have flex inside of grid. So that's not an issue. But if we came in here and we said display flex, and then flex, is it basis or position? I get my grid and flex box properties mixed up all the time. Flex flow, I think it's no wrap. Oh yeah, flex. Well, flex direction is fine. Where's end? Yeah, so if you were wanting to do that, oops, can't find my way back. Can't find my way out of paper box this morning. Flex direction, and let's do row reverse. And see, you can move it. You can move it over if that's what you're wanting to do. So that would be one thing. Let's hop out of that for a second though, because we in futzing around here we've not done anything actually with the code. So your main questions here were related to the button. So let's go ahead and just fix that. So this is your button class. You've probably got, so I'm looking for BTN about. I want to talk at some point about how we're writing these, because like is there a reason there's a flow button and then there's a home button and then there's about? I don't really know if that's necessary. You don't need the right and left, and then I've got like home pink. Let's just go ahead and save that. Okay, and then let's just say float left, save it. Okay, so now that's over here, and that's what we were looking for anyway. You will have a problem here because it's not going to float into position, so we've got to fix that with a media query. Although there are some people that would mention that might not even need media queries anymore, um, because of the things that we can do with CSS Grid. Let's look at bold, no mobile, left center. So text align center, but it's not center, so I'm not really sure what it's attempting to do there. Because the text align left, oh, it's okay, so you've got a media query on this, so you're trying to do something very specific. Let's look at this this margin bottom that you've got on that. If you take that off, that gets a little better. But my big issue is the space between. Right now it's just like this is kind of floating away, and I don't necessarily know why you're aiming for that. Margin bottom. I understand a little margin bottom, but not that much. Let's also look at this H3. Like, again, margin bottom. Like, this begins to come together a bit more. Also, there's the line height here. Like, line height, 150%. Maybe just 100. 110, 120. And then maybe you can bring your margin bottom back. And then we can get into font weight. And maybe we're talking about that 900 again. Oh, I'm in the wrong one. Of course I am. Forget bold. It's weird because it says H2 class bold. And why is it an H2? I don't understand why it's an H2. This is like the top level thing on your page. It should be an H1. But then we're saying lighter on bold. And I don't necessarily understand. There's got to be, yeah, there's bold. That's bold. That feels pretty light. Now, compared to this, I mean, it's not, I guess, it's a little bolder, but it's not that bold. Tadjul, you want to see the clouds move too? How do we make that happen? To be honest with you, I'd have to get in and look and see how this is built. And then it's probably something that you would want to you'd want to set a transition up to move that specific, like you'd want to have the cloud separate from the others. You'd want to basically break this apart so that certain elements moved on their own plane. But I think that we would need to get in and kind of pay close attention to how this is made. And I'm drilling in now. So this is like a PNG. That's not going to work. We would need like a PNG on top of a PNG, or maybe just an SVG. But the and then there's a question of, does it just kind of wiggle? Does it move like forever? I'm not necessarily sure what the right approach there is. But as we're continuing through here, let's go back to that button, because you had, let's close idea board, let's close Bergen, let's close idea, I just need about, so BTN about, so you've got this I class FA right angle. I don't want to say everything that isn't I gets. Where's your BTN home? Okay, so here's about. margin. This is actually where, instead of targeting the eye, I might just put it in a class. Let's see if, and I want to see if you've got any classes set up that are little, little margin elements. So it says extra pad mobile, subhead, margin top. Yeah, you know what's interesting to me is, like, as I'm going through your file, I get the suspicion, Degel, that we're going to want to come back and like do a complete audit on your CSS, and streamline it to where it's like 20 lines of code. Because right now it's just we're writing CSS for. It's like at this point you've got 2,400 lines of CSS. And I'm almost certain that a lot of this could be eliminated just through an audit of what you've created. And this is not uncommon of seeing somebody write CSS for the first time. But I think that we can come through and say, okay, what are we doing over and over and over again, and what are the things that we're seeing. So, this is fine as a first effort, but I think an audit is in the offing, to try to make this easier to manage. And this is really where components for everything that you're building ahead of time make sense, rather than living in the browser. And I'm guilty of it too. I've done it. I've done the whole let's just jump straight to the browser and begin building. But if you said, you know what, I've got one button, I'm going to use it everywhere, that simplifies the button pink, button home, button flow, button about, those things. All right. So that's what I'm struggling with right now, is I don't want to write any more CSS, and I'm curious what's actually in here. But again, I dislike the spacing on this, and I would really like to simplify the structure, if at all possible. So as we go in, I'm trying to figure out where I keep running in circles because I keep coming back to this margin bottom, and I just don't want it there. I don't want the line height there. So I want to tighten that up. But I will write some CSS here, and I'm just going to put it. I can't put it on. Actually, you know what I can do? I can do this. I will say btn about I, because I want to make sure that I'm not impacting other tags that you might have elsewhere. So I'm just going to say margin left. No, I wouldn't, Tadjil. I would do it after you get this to a point where you're releasing, because Tadjil has offered a question in Discord. The reason I wouldn't do an audit before is you could spend months just spinning your wheels and not ever getting fully through the audit. I want you to our priority here is release, and you can release and do audit at the same time, but you can't wait to finish it and then do the audit. You've got to finish it, ship it, and then do the audit afterward. And you can branch the whole project and do the audit off to the side. You don't have to do the audit on the live site. But I definitely want to encourage you to so I've added that padding now. It's in there. But like I said, I definitely want to encourage you to do the audit, but I don't want it to get in the way of you applying for jobs and stuff. So there's some space. Again, btn about it has this I tag. I'm targeting it, but I didn't want to really write more CSS. There may be a margin left, one rem in there somewhere, but we'll come back to this. But the alignment is just putting a float left on it, to push it where it needs to go. I would still advise coming in. You've got this bold, no mobile, left center, H2. I would take some of the margin off here. I would come through, take more. Actually, I'd take more of the margin off if I could. So I see margin. Again, line height. Let's give some of the margin back here. So again, I don't want all of it, but I'll probably want some of it. Maybe just one. And if you look at this, let's actually adjust the bottom of this too. Let's just lose the margin bottom there as well. If you look at this, versus the refreshed version, which we'll look at now. Let's do the old trick here. I've got too many screens open. Here's where we are. That's where I'd rather us be. Okay? I want, where we're at, too spacey. Okay? Adjusting that margin down, it creates a unit. And that's so much of what we talk about inside of the interface design part of the program. We focus on, okay, well, how do we design these elements so that they feel more like a unit? And I think that's what you're missing right now. Is this is floaty? It doesn't feel like a unit. This begins to come together. So, and I understand what's happening because you've got this space here, and you probably wanted that, but because I've adjusted this, it's causing an issue here. Well, my simplest solution for you would be to say this is an H1 and this is an H2, and then suddenly I have branched off from the H2s, which are you're using as labels. Okay, so that's my 2 cents there. I think that you've got some stylistic work to do. The good news is style is something that you can always work on. You can always elevate that. You can't style something that doesn't exist, and that I can't emphasize that enough to anybody who's watching this. Style is something that you can always improve upon. You can't style empty space, though. There has to be something to style, and Tegel's done that. So now we need to elevate. But you've done the initial work of getting us you've provided a canvas. Okay, you've provided a canvas and subject matter. A canvas by itself is just a canvas, but you've got subject matter now, content. And we can begin to work with this. But those button things, we fixed those. I'm going to go ahead and push that up so that we don't lose that. Sorry, very long-winded. You had a very simple question, and I hit 30 other things along the way. Git commit. Git push. So again, Tegel, look at the spacing. Consider moving that to an H1 from an H2, and then continue pushing forward. Again, I will, now that you've got something in here, I'll read through this and kind of give you some feedback. But I am very interested in hearing how you've grown and what you've learned as a designer instead of just getting like the backstory of Tegel. That may mean that this gets a little shorter up top, and then we have a little more down here. I do think the achievements is interesting or is important. I don't necessarily know if tools and skills. Maybe we're giving too much. Maybe we're giving too much to that, to be honest with you. But we can come back and talk about that. But I'm going to spend some more time going through this content. Let's take a second. There she is. Let's take, and now we'll come back to that. I'll just leave it open. So I reached out to Kara about her grid exercise and her hierarchy exercise, but I have not heard back. So in this exercise, the whole point is to establish a focal point. Like, as a user, where am I supposed to start with my exploration of the page? And we've got 4 options here, and this is a little different than what Luigi and Eve went through, because I really saw the need to switch what we were aiming at. It's easy enough to say find the bridges, find nature, but it becomes harder when I say, okay, let's do a horizontal design, let's do a vertical design. And one of the interesting things I thought was there were options that lead you into a different direction with each of these. With horizontal design, I really think that this just does an outstanding job. Yes, it's only 3 images, but there was no requirement to use all the images. But this it's very clear Kara's comfortable with design. A lot of designers that aren't comfortable with design, they'll avoid the edges. Kara's going right to them right away. So this is just an outstanding example of creating horizontal focal point with the images. This one is different though. This version, is really intended to be vertical, okay? But it still feels overwhelmingly horizontal in focus. So, I could see going large with this image or with this image and having these played as secondary. Not both of them. I want to pick one, just like you've done here. You've picked an image that is the focal point, and it's horizontal and it meets the criteria. Here, we're still using a lot of horizontal images, and that's fine. You can use them. But I want the focal point here to be a vertical image, and we just haven't picked. It's almost like we've got 5 images that are roughly the same size, and there is no hierarchy here. At best, we could say one of these 2 images is drawing our attention the most, and in the combination of the 2, maybe that is, quote, vertical. Because we know that we group things together by organization. But if I was going to group this together and say that this is vertical, what I would want to do is I'd want to give some specific space away and say, oh, I'm orienting a vertical group of horizontal images, but I'm pushing the other elements of the page away so that you focus more in this space. And we haven't done that, not particularly not in the way that it's done here. Over here, it's the same issue basically. There is one clear dominant element, and it's this. I view this as a unit, but you have other vertical images. You have 4 on the page. Oddly enough, they're all played smaller and not the focus. So I was a little flummoxed on this one because, yes, the sunflower photo is drawing my attention. It's a horizontal image, and the whole point was, okay, give me something that plays vertically, so I can kind of build around it. And you do a better job of this when we get into the part 2 of this exercise. Same thing here. This is horizontal, but, you nailed it here, and it's almost like you warmed up into the exercise. You nailed it on the bridges, but we're lacking that horizontal dominance here in with the nature images. So I definitely know that there are options here that should be able to produce a clear lead, but right now I'm only really feeling it with this. Like that's boom, clearly where I'm supposed to go, and the other ones are more muddled than that. When we go in, and that's not to say that those can't be effective designs. They're very Pinteresty. They can be effective designs, but that wasn't the target. The target was give me horizontal dominance, give me vertical dominance, and right now the bridges are the only ones that really carry the horizontal dominance. We look here. Here I thought you did a very, very interesting job. So the emphasis here is on the top, and you've done a good job of putting that emphasis right here on the top. You haven't necessarily utilized space. You went with I'm going to put an image in the background, and I'm going to put the typography in it, and that's fine. Much like Eve, we talked about this yesterday. You've got it looks like you are probably updating this right now. So I think yes. Oh, now I can see the grids. Yay, Kara! Thank you. So now let's go ahead and copy this. Kara just gave me access. That's what it's like when I have access. I can actually see the grids and everything. The interesting thing is you've got these little elements. They should probably be living on the grid, or you should create another grid. So just for organization. So you could come through and say, oh, this 12 column grid, I'm going to totally give it I'm going to give it a margin of 100. And that means that these elements can come outside and do whatever it is they need to do, right? But this is where we began adjusting the grid. Oddly enough, this is not the grid exercise. That's the next exercise. But you had it, like, again, the elements up here, you can just drag them over and make that all work. But our big focus here was this. And the only thing I would say here is, when we come in and we look at this image, there's a lot that we can do with regard to cropping it. So we can crop it. I can come in and just drag that up to put more emphasis on her, but also to give space to this typography. Eve actually yesterday put a screen behind it, which was not a terrible idea. So if I come in here and turn that off, you're kind of losing a little bit of typography here. Wouldn't be the worst idea in the world to come in and draw a box and say, oh yeah, you know what? I'm gonna multiply that down, and then I'm just gonna put that in the background here, and that way you've got a little more darkness to the background of that image, so that it separates. You can still see her. You could even put you could even put a gradient on this if you want it to. You could come in here and say, oh, hey, how about that fill? How about we make it linear? And then I will adjust it as necessary. And then you've got a gradient and fill. So that's that one. These others I thought were really interesting, and that was the thing. You went ahead and adjusted this up here. So I think that I think that you kind of understand the breaking apart and moving around. I really thought this one was effective. The whole emphasis. This is emphasis left, and you kept the typography over here. and I think that's fine. Just going to make a copy of it so we can kind of again, this is why I like having access, so I can just get in and we can kind of push things around. But this is emphasis left. The whole point of the exercise is to like create a focal point on the left side of the page, not just at the top, but on the left. And this is another one of those. Well, if we crop it and we go up, do we get more emphasis? Probably. But did you have emphasis before? Yes, actually you did, and it was great. But you can go up with this and basically get more. But then you had this right rail, and I thought that was a really smart solution. I thought that worked really well. Additionally, here I was really happy to see that you had decided I'm going to use space, and I'm going to use space to really put a focal point on just the typography. I would say that this is where, and we'll make a copy of that as, whoops. I would say this is where I want to make sure I've got the grid in mind as I'm working through. And this is where the image might actually come down, to where, hey, you know what? I'm going to put an emphasis around this. So rather than, here you've gone emphasis left. This is almost more emphasis top, but I still feel like it's because of the vertical orientation of the typography, it's kind of holding more to that side. But it's still like, this is clearly where our eye goes, and it helps that she's looking over at it. Another way that we could do this, and I'm just riffing now because I know that we've got just a few people watching. Another way you could do this is you could come over and put emphasis left on it by just doing, something like this, and it doesn't feel as dominant, but it all depends on what you do with this. And if you decide, hey, you know what, I'm going to do some sort of, and I'm trying to do something a little more interesting with the design. You could create this space around it. You could also come in and say, oh, you know what, you're going to be here, and I'm going to give you inordinate amounts of space, and then I will just have all this information right here. Or maybe potentially the better thing to do would be just to do that. And the interesting thing about that is you've got even space all the way around it, although it feels pretty wide over here. So you'd have to kind of manage what was going on there. Another thing, you could do something like this. Let's crop it. Let's just basically move her around. And Kara, as a publication designer, you know all of these tricks. So I'm certain that I'm more kind of showing the rest of the group some different thoughts here. But this definitely creates like some emphasis left, while also using this information and letting it kind of do what it needs to do. This is also identifying the bottom corner. You could also ungroup this and do more with this as well. And that definitely gets you into the emphasis left camp as well. So, I think overall, the solutions you had work. I think these are a bit better than this one, but you're always going to have your gut reaction. Okay, this is how this should be aligned. you know, when you push further, I think you can come up with something that's interesting, but you're going to have the clear winners, the clear, like, oh, that's great. The reason I push for the additionals mainly is to allow your designs to grow. Your design skills you can get kind of stagnant if you just always go for hey, I'm going to put a big image across the top. That works. The big image across the top works, and we'll see that in the grids exercise here. If you go to part 1 of the grids exercise, you can see right away this is a company called Hire a Villa, and Hire a Villa just, hey, big image across the top, done, right? So there's that. But I think that you need other things in your wheelhouse. So I really think that as far as the hierarchy exercise, part 2 is much more complete than part 1. I would like to see us come back through and take a stab at these 3. I think bridges horizontal you nailed. I want to see us hit the target on part 1 of on nature and bridges vertical. Okay, so there's that. Here, this is a little more simple. I don't necessarily know if we found the margin. Now that I see the grid, it looks like, really what we're trying to do here, if we can go in, is we're trying to establish, if you go columns, you can just say 1 column. You don't even need a number of columns. But you're trying to look for this margin here. And margin 64. It's pretty close. Not quite. I bet if we go up a bit, is it 70? Yeah, it looks like it's 70. Yeah, it's 70. And it's a little loose on the other side, to be completely honest with you. I think this is the padding around the button. And then it's hard to tell because the illustrations on this side. So really it's just like, can we find the common starting point on that left-hand side? And we can. And it's 70. You had 64. That was close. But it's harder to see when it's a grid than it is when it's just a column. Okay? So, the reason I focus on this the corollary to this is containers. When we you can ask Tegel about containers, but a container is gonna basically constrain your content to a certain width on the page, and to do that you need to understand what your margin is. Over here, this one's pretty close. You have effectively found the mix for the 5 columns at the bottom, okay, while also finding the margin. So you found 2 of the things that I was really hoping to find. The one thing we haven't found is we haven't figured out what these things are. And what's interesting is if we go with a multiple of, instead of 5, we go with a multiple of 12, we get 2 of these things. So we get the 3-column design here. We get the 2-column design here. We do not get the 5-column design at the bottom. So the 5 that you have, and Eve yesterday had 15 on here, and 15, interestingly enough, got you the 5 columns here and the 3 columns here. So it being divisible by 3 works if you go with 15. But what I was really hoping to see, and this is something that you pick up after using Figma for a while, you got the single column, right? And then we can actually add more frames. So if I add a frame here and I put it over the top, I could then come in and say, okay, I'm going to add a grid. And this grid is going to be columns. It's going to be 3. And I'm just going to make it significantly darker so I can see it. And aside from, I need to go in and adjust the margin a bit, or the gutter rather. So I've adjusted the gutter, and now I've got I've addressed the 3-column design. I could then copy this down and do it basically all over again, except this time it's 5. So I've got a 5-column grid. I've got the margin sorted out. I know the design is, 1 column. It has a container. I found a 3-column design. I found a 5-column design. This could in fact be a 2-column design, or it could just be a single column that has an image to the left and text to the right. But if I wanted to do that, I could just do 2 columns. So we have the ability here to adjust further. Grids can be kind of a gotcha. I feel like it's more important that we have a conversation around them than it is for you to go redo this thing. I don't want you to actually redo the thing, because on part 2 I can see that you actually know how to use the grid. You put a 3-column grid together, and yeah, the images are there. The sizes were different in that I was anticipating that you would create a 4-column design instead of a 3-column design, but it's fine. You basically got the gist that this was Pinterest, and you put together a masonry style design. So it's definitely functional there. Yeah, thank you, Kara. I got your note that you shared this with me. So on grids, I think we're fine. On hierarchy, I know that you know how to do this. I want to push what our solutions are for the first part. The second part, I think you did a very good job of finding the right. You found the clearest solutions. I want to encourage you to push further and think a little looser about what the designs could be, because I think it'll allow you to come up with some more interesting, and more interesting. That might not be the phrase that I'm looking for. More satisfying. At some point, we get tired of doing this over and over and over and over and over again. We just do. And at some point, and you know this, but from your time in doing publication design, there is a rut that will set in when you do daily deadline work. And for those of you who've never worked in publications, when you design a website, you typically design a website like once or twice a year, okay? And what I mean by that is the site, you might work on other sites, but if the site will get refreshed a couple of times a year, the main design. I'm not talking about the content. The content may switch out. At most, a lot of people like consistency in their site, so it stays basically the same year after year with minor tweaks as you go. But that can put you in a rut. Okay. Sorry. When you do publication design, you're doing it every single day, and every single day you're trying to come up with new solutions, and eventually you come down to like 3 or 4 that work, and then you're like, oh man, okay, I guess I'm doing option D today. I guess I'm doing option B today, and that gets very old. The great news is with digital design, we have a lot of freedom to do some different things. So that's why I was wanting to encourage you, like, look at different spacing, look at different photo organization. And that's why I was like, okay, give me one. Okay, now give me a different one. All right, and you did that. You came up with these options that clearly, they put the emphasis on the left differently. This is putting the emphasis across the top. Again, look at, is there a way that I can crop this image more effectively, so that it has more just punch? And I think it'll be great. I have, Kara, I have no doubt in my mind. We've got some other problems here. Wow. Tegel's got a problem I've literally never seen before. So an edit session for well, Tedgel, I have never seen that before. Um, it looks like, I mean, it looks like this is Vim. It gives you the option to abort. So I would just A abort. You just asked that question like a couple of minutes ago, but I would hit A and just try to abort it. Um, again, you had a few. You had a. I had a few changes before you pushed. Um, yeah, the trick, and I'm gonna bounce away from Karis for a minute. The trick, Tedgel, as we wrap up, is let's say I make these changes. I'm gonna change this to let instead of left. All right, and I'll say get status, and you can see that has updated. Um, if I want to go through and so let's say you've pushed up changes, I could say get pull origin master, and well, obviously it's saying that you're up to date, so it's not it's saying that you haven't pushed anything, so it's not causing the issue for me. It's one of the reasons why it's hard for me to replicate where you're at. But I've got the style sheet change. I don't. I need to either commit it and then pull, which is I think the issue there. You pulled without committing, or I need to do something with this file. The thing that I typically do, and I try to limit this, I try to limit my usage of this command because I don't want to get in a habit of throwing away a lot of stuff and putting it into it like a junk drawer, but I use get stash. And if I stash, notice that this went back to float left instead of being float let. Stash is basically saying I had something on the had something on the kitchen counter, and I'm just going to open up a drawer and dump it into that drawer and close the drawer, and the kitchen counter is clean again. Okay, so for you, I would hit abort. I would go through get stash. I would hide that crap. Whatever it is, or I would push. You can push as well. What it'll say is, I'm sorry, not push, but well, I guess that's the trouble. I don't know if you tried to pull or push. I'm not really sure where in the chain you are, but I would say that I would abort. I would use A to abort this issue, and then check in with me and let me know where you're at, because I'm operating just kind of on a wing and a prayer. I haven't had that issue pop up before. It's not to say that it's going to melt your machine or anything. I really doubt that it's going to cause any problems. But I would try to abort or quit rather than open, read, and all that. I would just try to abort or quit. Okay? All right. So, ladies and gentlemen, that is it for today's edition of the Feedback Loop. I hope that this has been helpful for all of you, really. If you have questions as we go through the weekend, feel free to reach out on the Discord channel. Happy Valentine's Day, by the way, and I guess President's Day is on Monday, so I will see you then. Take care.